Hello, everyone. We'll give everyone a few minutes to show up. Travis will be ready in a couple of minutes. Louie, you need to get out of the way. He has his nutcracker toy. Nutcracker's over, Louie. It looks like you've all done the webinars with us before, but just as a reminder, you can type in the question section if you have anything to comment or ask. There's Travis. He's feeling weird today. It's Monday.
White isn't good, right?
No.
It doesn't really show up.
It's fine. It's not too bright on your table right now.
You like my dress?
Yes, they love your men's high-low tutu.
That I don't have like three I can switch back and forth with. Is there Sharpies back there?
There's one.
I'm nearly ready. Don't show them the back.
They already saw. That fit him a few years ago.
This is fun though, all the ribs in it.
They're asking if there's a headpiece for your outfit.
There is, but I don't know where it is. It's missing.
Look at the back.
I need some non-color.
It's like you need a whole other bodice
I know.
attached to that one.
It's far from fitting.
Can't escape the camera.
Right. We'll just keep using this portable stuff. Pink might be better to use for today. That shows up better than white, right?
Yes.
Blue shows up. Okay, I'm almost ready. Let me take my tutu on. I should put it on the guy though, right, to show him kind of the idea behind it. Or just look at it on the table.
Yeah, look it up here first.
Let me get a little water. It's time, right?
Travis thought the class was at noon,
I'm ready.
so
I'm ready.
he doesn't have his water prepared.
So I don't cough all over here. I'm going to do a high-low circle skirt too. And I need I hope Tom isn't lost. He's taking public
When was this class over?
What?
When was this class?
9. He might be lost. He would message if he was lost, don't you think?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to high-low and unique shaped tutus. And we're actually going to do a high-low skirt too. We have a skirt class that we did that's available, but somebody asked a specific question. We did a Spanish crab last year, which was like a Spanish skirt that was short in the front and long in the back. And they want to know how we came up with that pattern. So I'm going to show you. And then today we're going to look at just like the netting cutting for a tutu that's short in the front and long in the back. So we're going to do a romantic high-low skirt that's short in the front, long in the back. And then we're going to do a classical tutu that's short in the front and long in the back. Does anybody that's in the room with us, oh, I drank too much water. Does anybody that's with us right now need to see anything like just layers going on a panty, or we get all that and we can cover other stuff? Because I did send out, for the few of you that didn't take the classical tutu class, I just sent you day 1 so you can see the panty and basque being made and go through that on your own rather than me doing that today, because pretty much everybody else in this group has made a tutu already. So we're just looking at different ways to cut stuff. And tomorrow we're going to look closer at like, how do you cut one where the top looks like a starburst, or how do you cut one where the top like has petals, like 3 sections of petals or shapes nesting inside of each other. And we're going to also, if you want to get super elaborate, we can look at like, how could you cut one and get it ruffled when it's put together to look like a diamond or a heart. We'll talk about how you go about that stuff too. So let's first just look at this Carabas thing that I was wearing. It used to fit me. This is, I don't know if it's the same in everywhere, but a lot of times in America, the villains in the ballet will be played by men. So this was actually a man's tutu that was made years ago. That's gone to a few companies, and it keeps coming back to us and living with us. But it's really kind of a hybrid of a classical tutu and a romantic tutu, because there's no hoop in it, and it's made of a lot of netting. And then the edges of this one we burnt with a creme brulee torch on the farm in South Dakota, out on the patio. But it still has a bodice. So this has a long line bodice, so it doesn't really, well, it kind of shows. There's a built-in hip. So this is kind of like our imperial bodice, but there's points put on it. Then on the inside, to hold all this weight of the netting up, there's a lycra bodice on the skirt. So even though a basque, there's a lycra basque on the skirt. So this bodice has long hips that give the illusion of a basque, but then on the inside there's a lycra basque with an elastic waistband. So this is what's kind of holding the weight of all this skirt up. And then if we flip it over, it's just our same old panty, and this one's 2 layers of sheer mesh, and then all the different layers of net are put onto this panty. So like there's a couple different ways we'll look at this. So if you see this one, all of the layers go from short to long. So this one, the front of this is going from 2 inches out to like 12 inches in the back. Then the next one is going from 3 to like 14, and then it goes 4 to 16, and then it goes 6 to almost like 20. So then it's getting even longer at the back. So one of the things to think about when you're doing the high-low one is like, do you want an even swoop? Do you want to go 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches? Do you want the same amount of jump? We're going to call it the jump. So we're going to jump from one measurement at the front to one measurement at the side to a new measurement at the back. Or you can play with the jump to make kind of different silhouettes of a high-low shape. So you could go 2 inches, 8 inches, 30 inches if you want the back to get dramatically longer. And I'll try to find, we did another carabass and a crow last year, 2 years ago, Rachel says, and I think those got more long at the back. They weren't even right. There was a more dramatic swoop. I mean, this thing has just been smushed over the years, but that's kind of the idea we're going for. And this one doesn't have an even jump from the front to the side to the back. So if we look at the very front of this one again, you'll see that the front is super short. There's this little really short section, and then it drops down quick and goes out over the hip rather than it dropping down evenly and going from the front to the back. So you're going to kind of decide, like, what do I want to do? And you can apply it to all kinds of stuff. But I mean, this is just a fun costume to look at too. There's airbrushing, there's sequins, there's crud between the layers. We love crud between the layers. That goes way back. And there's also like little studs and rhinestones on the top. So that's fun. Oh, this one, Rachel found these. Yeah, so see the front of this one is longer. This is a crow to go with a carabass. So you can see the front of it is pretty long, like probably 14 or 15 inches. Then it stays even towards the side, and then it's got this big long drop at the back. So you just kind of figure out math-wise what you want to happen with the shape. And I can send everybody that picture too. So now that we've looked at that, let's actually start with a romantic skirt that's going to be high-low. Hi, Sabina. Sabina's here. Everybody tell Sabina hi. You've got your list, and Rick's going to have Tom work on pants, and you guys can just work through clown stuff. Sounds good? Cool. They're finishing clown costumes. And today, we're going to work in miniature so that we can look at more stuff together. So let's actually start with cutting. So my miniature dress form that we're going to be decorating, she's a size 6, but she's half of a size 6. Let me grab a tape measure. I thought I had one right here in the pile, but I don't. So hopefully I don't completely throw anybody by working in small scale. So what we're going to do is we're just going to draft a miniature tutu to kind of get this idea rolling. So I'm going to write down her waist. Would you hand me a Sharpie from behind? Oh, you already did. She's so good to me. We'll do pink today in honor of Rachel's upcoming birth. It's a girl, and she's wearing pink. We just got pink everywhere. So I'm not gonna draft a basque for our little dress form, but I do want to know what her waist is. And then the next thing you're gonna figure out for your human or your half size is, what do we want the front to be? What do we want the back to be? And what do we want the side to be? And for this scenario, we're gonna do an even swoop from front to back, and then we'll start to mess with that. So I'm gonna just make my 3 little columns here, and let's just do four layers of skirt. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're gonna go shortest to longest. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, the product I want to develop, you guys, is like a little slide rule thing where you can just put in like your 2 numbers and slide things, and it will give you all sorts of other info. How fun would that be? So we're going to just cut in miniature 4 widths of 54. So what's half of 54? It's like 20. We're going to just do like 4 widths. We're going to do like approximately 4 27-inch widths. So our circumference around, we're not doing 4 widths of 54, we're doing half of that since we're working in small. But what we're going to figure out next is this is going to be the center front and the center back. So you just want to figure out the length of your front and the length of your back first. So we're going to say that this skirt's going to go from 8 inches down to, let's do 8 to 16 first. So that'll give us an even 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 at the side, 13, 14, 15, 16 inches at the back. So we'll start with an even one. We're going to go 8 inches. What I say the side is 12 inches. The back is 16 inches. And we're going to put our layers of skirt just a half an inch below each other. So we're going to go 8, 12, 16. Then we're going to go 7 and a half. What's that? 11 and a half. 15 and a half. 7, 11, 15. Then we're going to go 6 and a half. 10 and a half, 14 and a half. So we're ending up with layers ending approximately the same as each other. If you want to account for fullness, you, instead of going just a half an inch less, you could go like a 1/4 inch less. So each layer would be a 1/4 inch longer than the next, still giving the illusion that it all ends at the same place. And we're doing this first one where the layers end similar in a similar spot, where when we get to our romantic or our classical tutu, we're going to do it so that when we look underneath that the first couple, so we're drawing a classical tutu now, so layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 are going to all probably have about the same amount of skip. Then we're going to start making layer 4 longer at the back, layer 5 longer at the back, to make the back of this one longer. But let's start with our romantic skirt. And I'm going to just use green and blue tulle since I've already got some cut up. And we're going to show you in miniature how we do this. And then we might show one in maximum later because it takes the whole table to cut this stuff up. Yeah, Rachel uses a 72-inch ruler. We'll do one. We should do one great big one just so we can all see that. So I'm going to cut on the cross for today since we're just dealing with little pieces. So instead of 4 widths of 54 for my skirt, I'm going to just do 2 widths of 54 because we're working in miniature. If the miniature totally throws anybody, let me know. But I think just talking about this and seeing it a couple times will really be beneficial. So let's just say that we're going to go blue, pink, blue, pink. So 1 is going to be blue, 2 is going to be pink, 3 is, oh, I don't have pink, it's green. We're going to go blue, green, blue, green. Pink is for when we do a classical one. The only pink tool I have right now is the Crawley Terrible stuff. Oh, yeah, that one's netting. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. So I'm going to cut my blue layers on the cross. So my first one is going to be 8 inches and then 7 inches of blue. But so you're going to cut, actually, you're going to cut the longest part. I got ahead of myself. You have to cut the longest length of each layer. So we're going to cut 16 and 15, and then we're going to angle our 6 up to 8 and our 15 up to 7. So we're going to cut our 2 blue ones. Get your netting more arranged on the table than I have. And I need to get up to 16 inches. So I'm going to cut a 16 and a 15. So it's folded in fourths right now. And you'll find that for this even jump from the front length to the back length, having it in fourths will be really helpful. So there's a 16 and a 15. I'm going to fold it into better fourths here in a minute. So we've got 16 15. Let's cut our green layer out, which we're going to cut 15 and a half and 14 and a half. We're starting with the longest pieces. So if you were doing this, cutting it on the cross, but making a high-low skirt, or high-low romantic tutu, you're going to want to do all of the seaming first. You have to seam all of this together. There's one width of 54, two widths of 54. So that makes sense, right? You've got to seam it all together before you cut the short parts out of your front. I'm going to do another 1, 2. Oh, look at that, ready to go. So now we're going to cut 15 and a half and 14 and a half. So I'm going to do my 15 and a half. Then we're going to chop away. So you do lose some fabric. And you can plot it out, actually, if you're really like, if you're like super into math, you can plot it out so that if this was our piece, right, and we're cutting this angle across it, you can figure out how to reuse the parts that you're cutting off so that you're not wasting stuff. So this is going to be 15 and a half. And then we are going to do a 14 and a half. So 16, 15 and a half, 15 in blue, and then we're going to do a 14 and a half. We'll also cut one classical, one in an oval, which is another good one. If anybody knows London Royal Ballet's Sleeping Beauty, not the revival of their ancient one, but the 90s, early 2000s one, maybe it's earlier than that. The Jules Fairies have oval cut, the diamond, ruby, emerald girls towards the end of the show have these beautiful oval cut tutus. I should try to find a picture of that too to send. Oh, hell. And then you do that where you jack it all up. You know what? Let's just do it again. So this is going to be my 14 and a half. So now we're going to show you kind of the idea of getting the high and low cut in there. So let's start with our first blue one right here on the table. So this is our layer 1. It's going to go from 8 to 16 inches, and we've already got it cut 16 inches. But now I'm going to kind of refold it to make sure my fourths are even. So we want fourths here. We're going to have it cut in fourths. And then, so here, these two layers together, that's going to become my center back. That's going to stay 16 inches. And we're going to go up to 8 inches in the front. So the fold on my left is my center front. This fold is my side. This is my center back. So I dropped my Sharpie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the point. So the back, we're not taking anything off the back, and our center front is going to come 8 inches down. So I'm going to mark my 8 inches in the front. And then my side, this fold over here is my side seam. It might show better when we do the green one. So there's my front. My side is going to be 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So now I'm going to just cut that into here. So I'm going to cut from my side up to my front. And you can stretch this out over the table however you want. So I've cut my side up to my front, and then the angle is going to stay the same because we did an even drop. And after this one, we'll cut one that doesn't have an even drop. So I've cut my side up to my front, and now I've got to cut from my side down to my center back. Now, this is a big ruffly thing, but we're coming down at an angle. If you want the back to be just a little more feminine, instead of coming right down to an angle, you can leave a little bit that's perpendicular to your center back, leave a little bit flattened out, and then scoot up to the angle. So here's our layer 1. If I just put them in order by the ruffler, I think there's layer 1. Layer 2 now is 15.5, but we're going to go up to 7.5. So I'm going to open it in fourths, just like we did. And I would say one thing that will help you is to always make sure you know kind of where your center front is. Do you know where your center front was last night? So now we're going to find the fold. I just love working with tulle, Rachel. What am I going to do when I have to cut stuff out? I'll manage. Okay, so we're doing 7.5 to 15.5. So now I'm going to come down from the top, 7.5. And then halfway between 7.5 and 15.5 is 11.5. So now I'm going to cut that out. And then just like I said earlier, if you want the back to be a little softer and not a point, you could do the same in the front. So you could angle towards your front and then just curve the last little bit so that you have a little right angle at the front instead of making a point all the way to the front. I like this earlier time slot, you know, this is nice. Who knows what time it is anywhere else. Now we're going to do the same thing in the back and angle that up. I've got a little pucker in there, but this is just a demo, you know. Okay, we've got our second layer. Then we're going to go back to blue. Our next blue one is 15 inches, and we're going to go up to 7. So fold it in fourths. So if you have great big long pieces, having a big work surface will help. Keep the front. I'm keeping my front on the left. Also, think about like if you were doing this in sections in cross grain, seaming it together, you could also hook one front to one back together, a front to a back together, and just deal with each side of the tutu instead of folding it all up and cutting it at once. So this one is going 7, 11, 15. And I've got an 8.5 inch ruler, so there's 7, 11, down to the edge. And then let's do our very last one. I have a thread caught in my eye. And actually, my green, I've measured it a little bit bigger than my blue. My widths aren't exactly even, but it's the idea. This one goes 14.5 up to 6.5. So my middle is 10.5. So I'm going to be 10.5 over here. 6.5 at my center front. And we're going to cut that out. A lot of arranging. I definitely think this is easier with a classical tutu than a romantic. Oh, and also everybody, I'm going to send you a size look online of our radiance pattern. And it's not really a high-low tutu, but there's notes in there about cutting like a yin and yang tutu, where it like goes short to long on one side of the body and then short to long on the other side of the body. Those would be good numbers to look at too. It might even be on the pattern info page online, but I'll send everybody whatever size they want of that. And that's a Leo tutu. Okay, so now I'm going to ruffle this up and then we'll hold it on the dress form. My chair, I need a chair. I don't want to disrupt the dogs, you know, in their little dog beds. They're here with us. We got the whole gang. Thank you. Whoa. Okay, back in business. So I'm going to just go from the bottom up. And actually, since I realize my green is a little bit longer, I'll take a tiny pair of scissors too. I'm going to ruffle my green a little bit tighter. These are short. This won't take very long. Thank you. Well, maybe I'm going to do, there we go. Boy. So now I'm going to ruffle the edge that we cut the angle into. So I'm going to leave my straight edge. So I've got a trapezoid, right? The top is my straight edge. I like to ruffle the edge that's had the angle cut into it because I think the bottom looks a little bit better. Like the weave is less cut across on the bottom if you ruffle the sides you cut. A little tighter. That looks like that'll fit my girl. And then I'm actually going to do the other green. So I'm ruffling the side that has the angle cut into it, not the side that's mostly straight. And you could also mark your center front fold. Oh, I did this one way too tight. You could mark your center front fold with a safety pin to make sure you're kind of evenly putting your netting around. Then let's do our blue, which I don't have quite as long. So I'm not going to ruffle it as much. There's my middle layer. So I want to ruffle the side that's got the ankle cut. Well, this one is barely ruffled. Oh, I don't quite have it in the right part of the equation here. There we go. And I've got a thread getting caught. Okay, let's work from our bottom up on this one. Whoops. And then I think we'll do a non-tulle or net high-low basic shape gores and then move on from there. So now let's dress up Judy here. So we've got our bottom one, which I snapped a thread on. And my ruffles are a little bit too tight. So let's pin that. The little half forms are so great because you can really work out all kinds of stuff in small and make sure you're happy. So we've got our front and then our back that's longer. So back's longer and it's evenly going up to the front. And then we've got our next layer, which is going to go a half an inch above that. There's actually right now at is it Ballet Met? Is that in Columbus, Sabina? Do you know? They're doing a Prince of Oz ballet, and there's some gorgeous images. They've got some high-low tutus, some kind of like hybrid high-low stuff, and a really fabulous queen too. So then let's put our next layer on. And I kind of have a chunk of Sharpie that's my front. So everybody's completely on board with like basic even shaped high-low romantic skirt. Well, actually, we're going to cut another romantic layer that doesn't have an even jump from the front to the back. We're going to do one where the front is more the same. That's starting to show. So we've got, actually, maybe I should give it a little bit of steam, huh? So we've got our short front, and it's just swooping down evenly to the back. Rick, if I give you this, would you just blast a little steam on it? Because I think it'll be easier. Right now, it just looks like a hot cloud mess. We're going to have Rick you just tame these a little bit so that it's more burnt, so that we can see the back is long and the front is short. Okay. Cool. Oh, there you go. So Rick's going to give that a little steam, but let's look at another romantic scenario quick. If you want a skirt that is more the same length, oh, never mind. We'll turn it on. We can look at it in a little bit. Rick's going to steam that. If you want the front pretty much the same length, but just the back to dip down, we're going to just keep the same measurement. Would you grab me another little dress form too? We can undress one of those. So if you want the front the same, but the back to dip down, you were going to do measurements where the front and side are the same measurement. So let's just say we're going to do 8 inches at the front, 8 inches at the side, and then let's make the back really dip down 16 inches. Let's cut one like that. So I need my 4 widths of something again. So we're going to do where the front and side are the same, but the back dips down. Actually, I'm going to do this one. Dusty, she's dusty. So if this was your full length, whether you're railroad cutting or cutting on the cross, if we're going to go 8 at the front, 8 at the side, and 16 at the hem, we've got to start with a 16-inch piece. So 16 inches from the waist down, or the hip down, wherever your measurement is. So we're going to square up our thing, and we've still, whatever your length of your layer is, still divide it by 4. So there's 16, and we're going to leave the front to the side at 8. So we're not going to shrink anything until we get to the side. So I'm going to mark my front and side are going to be 8 inches. There's my front to my side, and then we're going to angle down. So I'm going to just cut that off. Front to side's the same length, and then the back is going to have more. This will be more like the picture Rachel held up with the cell phone. And those are more like a long, droopy classical tutu rather than just a romantic or classical tutu. So now we've got a shape that's a little more defined. So we have a front is the same length to the side, front, side. Then we're going down really dramatic to the center back. So you could also do, if you want the front to come up a little bit, so it's really whatever lengths you can think about. You could divide each side of our body actually into thirds. Oh, there we go. So I've got a third, a third, a third. This is just half of our body, right? So there would be a fold here. You could do a front that's maybe 6 inches, down to 8 inches, down to 10 inches. And then if you want, you could go all, you could do a back instead of all the dip happening from the side. You could keep the front angling to the side back, and then at your center back have the big dip. So it's really, you can really change the shape depending on where you've taken away material. So I'm going to ruffle this one. You don't even have to move the camera. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Quick ruffle. Okay. So now we've got one where the front is more, I ruffled it too tight again. We've got one where the front to the side is more even, and the dramatic part of the swoop or the jump is in the back. So play with that. I mean, there's so many different things you can do. So this one starts to have kind of a bird-like feel, where the front is more one length. So we've got our front even to the side, and then all of our glam is happening right at the back. So it's making even more of a noticeable point, more of a teardrop. When you look at it straight on from the front, you can see all of her skirt in the back. And you could do shorter and longer layers just like we did with the first one, which Rick is steaming right now. Does it look better? Oh, it looks better already. So does anybody have questions kind of about what I did here or what I did on the one Rick is steaming? If not, we will continue on. That concept makes sense. So you can also have this shape, and you can have your layers on a romantic skirt and at the same place, or even more drama, you could cut it more like a classical tutu where the next one is noticeably shorter, the next one inside that is noticeably shorter, and just continue it all the way up. Hand me that piece of pattern paper on the chair there. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you, and someone emailed that they wanted me to cover, isn't a tutu, but it's good skirt stuff. And it kind of fits into this romantic thing right now. So if I'm making my miniature size 6 girl kind of a flamenco styled skirt that's high-low, I'm going to measure her waist is 13 inches. So her waist in the real world is 26. Oh, good. Thank you. Here, we can look at this one again. So Rick gave this a little bit of steam, and it's a little more noticeable that the front is angling to the side, and then it evenly scoops down to the center back. So from the back, we're just evenly scooting the whole way up to the front. How darling. And that's cut out really quick, but okay, so we're gonna make a 13-inch waist circle skirt. I just had that ruler. There we go. I'm gonna use our little ruler. Is there a pencil back there? Actually, let's do a half circle. Let's do half and whole circle. So let's make a high-low half circle first. So you have to think about, too, when you're cutting circle skirts, right? If I want a full circle, I'm making a circumference that fits the waist of my performer. If I'm doing a half circle, I have to make a circumference that is twice the waist because we're only using half of the circle. So if her waist in miniature is 13 and I'm only going to cut half of a circle, I need to cut 26 inches. So I'm going to cut my 26-inch waist. So I'm going to find the 0. I'm going to find what row is 26 inches. And I'm going to put my axis on there. Then I'm going to put my pencil in the 26-inch hole. And there's my waist. Then I'm going to figure out how long do I want the back and front and sides of this to be. So if this were me, I would say that my straight line here is going to be my center back probably. So I'm going to fold this. You could fold it into quarters or eighths. Let's fold it into quarters. And now let's put our high-low quality into a circle skirt here. So we can leave it folded in half and just deal with it in quarters. So if we want our center back to be, I'm going to need one more piece of pattern paper about this size. Our center back, let's say, is going to go to 14 inches. Let's make the side only, let's go up to 12. And then let's make it an uneven. Instead of going 14, 12, 10, let's go 14, 12, and then something random like 5. Make the front really short. So now we have to figure out the distances in between our front, our side, and our back. And from 14 to 12 is an easy one. What's the middle of that? 13. So on this 8th, I'm going to go up 13. So that then I'm going to make a nice even curve from there to there. And then now I've got my center front. I can decide, do I want this to evenly go there, or do I want a little more flat across the front? So if I want this to be a little more flat across the front, so now I have my side front, right? This spoke is my side front. This spoke is my side. This is my side back. If I don't want a whole bunch of drop to the side front, if we've got, what do we do here, 5 inches? Maybe here I'm only going to go to 6, so it gets a smidge longer at the side front. And then now I'm going to split the difference. I'm going to go from 6 to 12. That's easy. Between 6 and 12 is 9. So this is now the space between my side front and my side. You know, we have like the next front. So I'm going to cut that out. Everybody's kind of on board with what I've done here. And then we get a shape a little more like that. So let's cut this out. So another thing, right? When you're making a skirt like this, we've got the center front. We have our sides. If you know a little bit about bias, you can decide like where you think the bias is going to grow. So right now, the bias is going to grow a ton at my sides. So here the center front is my straight grain, and then I've got perfect bias almost going at my sides, which means that this is going to get really long at the sides. If you don't want that to happen, cut your front on the fold, or with the straight of grain going up the front. Your side can still, your side of the front, right? So this is my side front. That can be biasy, but if you cut this, the very side of the side back, if you cut that on the straight, now the straight of grain from this is going to keep your side front from growing. So you would put a couple notches on there. And then if you cut this on the straight, this back piece on the straight, what happens is the center back is on the bias. So if anything is going to grow, it's your longest part already, and it's going to grow evenly. Another thing you can do is lay it out so that every piece goes straight to bias if you wanted to. And if anybody's like burning for more of this stuff, we do have an old skirt webinar which can still be for sale. But let's cut this out now. So this is going to be our high-low kind of flamenco style dress with a half circle instead of a whole circle. And at this point too, before you even free this, you can start doing your math of figuring out where am I going to put a layer and how long does it need to be. And actually the last one we did of this, we had some layers that disappeared. So the first layer went the whole way around the skirt. The third layer went the whole way around the skirt, but our layer 2, our second layer, if we cut these all even, we're going to end up covering up 3. So our layer 2 just kind of faded away and disappeared before it got all the way to the front. So in the front of this skirt, you could have 3 layers, but in the back, you could have 5, 6, or 7, just depending on how you want to lay it out. And laying it out in tiny is much easier than laying it out in large. The dogs are extra barky today. Sorry, folks. So I've got my straight edge here, and I'm going to cut out my side back and center back. And I'm just sticking on a 1/4 inch seam allowance because we're working in itty bitty. So this would be a base for a high-low Spanish skirt or flamenco skirt. And we put the high part right in the center front. So you could use the same knowledge and put the highest part over one leg. You would just cut the side front, your higher part, and then work from there. Oh my gosh, I actually have a sharp rotary cutter. So now our side front, we only need one of that guy. And I'm going to cut him on the fold because that's a little bit easier. Oh, you know the other thing we should do is get that little smocking pleater thing out today or tomorrow and show everybody that, which is just another great way to deal with tulle. I think it's on that shelf to the left of Rick. So we're kind of doing like a little extension from the folks that did the romantic tutus also. So now we've got this, our front and our side front. So I'm going to seam this together really quick. So I'm going to hook my fronts to my sides. Then, like if we look at the fabric mechanics of this, our side, right, we cut this on the straight. This doesn't grow at all. Our center back is on the bias. So if anything on our romantic skirt gets longer, it's the center back. Ooh, cool. We're going to play with this thing too a little bit later because that's just fun to know what you can do with. So mechanic wise, our center back is going to be the thing that grows. So if anything stretches out a little bit, it'll be our center back. The other thing you can do if you don't want this to grow is take a piece of twill tape or cut the salvage edge of a piece of fabric and measure your pattern piece, and you would take a little piece of tape and stitch that into your seam allowance at the same time so the center back doesn't grow at all. And our non-growy side back is going to keep our growy side front. Our side front is stretchy. This piece is going to hold this piece together. Look how much I was able to make that grow just by pulling on it with my finger. So I'm going to ease that back onto there. And any of the lines and stuff you can figure out now are better than later. Oh, Everett is just a nightmare today. It's because UPS is delivering stuff to the neighbors. Another good bit of info let's look at is kind of like if you just have a skirt with ruffles like a can-can skirt, how in the heck do you figure out where to sew them versus how long they are? Let's actually look at that before we sew this together. I'll sew my center back up too. So this is a half circle, not a whole circle. And then we'll do a whole circle that's also high-low here in a minute. Let's say now that we have not a high-low skirt, right, but just a skirt that's covered in ruffles. It's got rows and rows of ruffles, like a can-can skirt. So what you have to figure out is where are your rows. I figure out what I want to be visible. I figure out like how much ruffle do I want showing, and then I go from there. So let's just say we're going to put 3 ruffles on here on this miniature skirt that are 3 inches long. There's a visible ruffle. There's a visible ruffle. There's a visible ruffle. On a can-can skirt, it's also nice, or any ruffled skirt like a key tree skirt, whether it's high-low or not, you can also really like beef up the visual by going shorter as you go up. You could go 4 inches, 3 inches, 2 inches, 1 inches. You go 10 inches, 9 inches, 8.5 inches, 8, you know, whatever you come up with. So if this is the amount of ruffle that's visible, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. If this is the amount of 4th ruffle we want visible, we want the top of it to be hidden. So then I come in and I say I want my top to be a good inch and a half up. So my 4 is really sewing to this line. So my 4 is sewing to that line. My 3 is also going to sew up 1.5 inches. So there's hidden ruffle. My 3 ruffle is sewing to there, and we're going to do the same with the 2. My 2 is sewing up to that line. So each ruffle is covering up the one below it. So then you just come on your paper pattern, instead of like doing tons and tons of figuring with the calculator, I had 3 inches, an inch and a half. Let's say I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top of my ruffle and a 1/2 inch at the hem of my ruffle. So right now, before seam allowance, my ruffle is 4.5. I'm gonna cut it 5.5 inches. So 4 is 5.5 inches, the height of my ruffle. 3 is 5.5. 2 is going to also be 4, 3. 2 is going to also be 3 inches plus the inch and a half, 5.5. But one is coming out of the waist and doesn't have to tuck underneath anything. So we were left with 2 inches, plus we want a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top and bottom. So my 1 is going to be 3 inches. But when that's all done, it's going to look like all the ruffles are the same length. Does anybody have a question about that? That's just fun to know too. Okay, let me seam my half circle together and then we'll do a whole circle. Then we'll get back to tutus. So I'm gonna not ruffle for a minute. So I'm putting my, so also remember I said that one of these pieces is bias and one is straight. I want the bias piece to be towards the feed dogs because the feed dogs are going to keep the bias piece from growing. So I have my straight of grain on the top. And if you want to cut gores and put the straight of grain down the middle, you need to cut more gores. Like you would want to cut like 8 or 12 gores if you have the grain down the center. Because the sides of all of those gores will have different amounts of bias. Oh, look, see, look, here's what happened. Check it out. I didn't sew with my bias piece on the bottom, and I've got like this extra 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to just flip my piece over and keep the bias underneath, and the sewing machine will ease that in. And now my center back. So if we didn't want the center back of this to grow, you would put a piece of Hug Snug or a little piece of salvage edge cut off, or a little piece of stay tape, a little piece of ribbon. All right. Let's dress up our girl here and then do a full circle version because the idea is the same. Who's hungry? I'm getting hungry. I mean, this doesn't even have to be the base of a Spanish or similar styled skirt. This could be, you know, really beautiful in chiffon. Oh, I lost my tape measure. My seams need pressed. But the idea, you can see, we were trying to make the front a little flatter and then scoop down quicker. So now we've got this kind of like real leggy shape. Imagine it covered in ruffle. So now we've got short front coming down to a really, really low back in a half a circle skirt. So if I was putting a girl on stage in a half circle, I would try to make sure that my design does have a short front because she needs the freedom of her legs and so she can deal with all of this in the back. Okay, we're going to do the same kind of thing, but with a full circle right now. Anybody have a question about that? You know you guys can ask questions. It's such a quiet bunch today. So yeah, actually one of the Oz dresses that's in this Prince of Oz right now at Ballet Met in Columbus has a skirt cut like this, loaded with ruffles. So her whole legs are framed, but she just has miles and miles of stuff going out behind her. Now let's do the full circle version of the same idea. And why don't we offset the front? Let's make this one high on her side front instead of high on her center front. So I'm going to start by dividing it in 4.
Where can you get one of the small mannequins?
We get these ones on eBay or Amazon. I want to say this says it's from displayimporter.com, but I think we're getting them from somewhere in New Jersey. And you can get small mannequins in multiple sizes. You can even get them with legs. And what's great with the small mannequins, if you start doing patterning, doing body blocks and stuff, you can make your miniature body block and figure out all your bodices and stuff right on in miniature and then make it large, problem solving small.
What do you call them when you do a search?
Oh, I think it's just half size. I think you just look up half scale mannequin, half size mannequin, half size dress form. Or scale, yeah. And then what's wild is that this enlarges to a girl with a 36 bust and a 26 waist. This is only half size. I don't get it. Okay, so we're going to make a full circle skirt, and we're going to put the highest part over her leg instead of at the center front of her. And since we're doing a full circle now, and we're going to make it fit, we're going to do just 26 inches. So I end up with a longer circle. And let's just cut that sucker out. And let's put another fold so we have our side fronts. So now, if we look at this, oh, that's funny. I cut 26 because in the real world she's 26. She's actually 13. Let me do it again. Do you see what I did there? I have a piece right here. Don't be like Travis. Pay attention to what you're doing. So our size 6 in the real world has a 26-inch waist. Our size 6 in miniature has a 13-inch waist. Half size. And actually, is Leanne in this class? Is there a Leanne? We're having, anybody who's in Australia, we're having the damnedest time with the US Post Office. They changed, well, anybody who's not in America, they changed one of the forms we use. And the issue is some of the people at the international center, so it like goes from our post office to the international one, they don't recognize the new form, or they're looking for the old form, and stuff just sits and sits and sits. So stuff sits in Chicago and then either goes on to other countries or comes back to us. I have to message them again. Okay, now we have the right size circle. So we're going to make it so that this one is shorter over her leg rather than over her front. So there's my center back. And actually, this same kind of these same steps you can just apply to rectangles when we get later today to the classical one. We're going to start with a classical high-low one, so like a hooped tutu or a non-hooped tutu, but that's straighter out from the waist, that is shorter in the front and longer in the back. So this would be our side front. This would be our side front. And then you've got to decide, do you want a skirt that is shorter over the leg and the longest part is opposite? So do you want this to be the shortest over her leg and the longest part to be opposite that? Or do you want this shorter over the leg and have all the length be in the center back? And I think that's what we're going to do for right now. We're going to have all the length be in the center back. So let's say that over our girl's leg, we're going to do 5 inches, and we're going to go all the way out to however much paper I've got here, 10. Let's actually go from 4 to 10. So my shortest part is going to be over a leg. This one's going to have a little more futzing with. My shortest part is going to be 4 inches. My longest part is going to be 10 inches. So we've got our shortest over the right leg, our longest in the back. Now we're not going to have the same amount of jump from the side front to the center front and around on the left side of her body as we do on the right side of her body. But I would say you could go ahead and make the sections, the eighths, either side of the center back the same. So that there's some mirror quality in the back. So let's go from 10 to 8. Then you can decide if you want the sides to be the same or if you want one side of her body to be shorter on the side that are short legged. So we're going 10 inches, we're going 8 inches. And now we're going to go from 4 to 8. So that's a pretty easy one to figure on this side. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 6 is the magic number at the side. So we're going 4, 6, 8, 10. But now here, if we went 4, 6, 8, now our 8 is way over here. So we're going to decide, do we want the sides to be the same length, or do we want from the side front all the way around to here to be an even swoop, and this is a different swoop? Rachel, what should I do? Even or more crooked? More crooked because it's trickier, right? So now we've got 4 at the side front. Now we just have to start figuring out, like, how are we going to get to 8? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That one turned out pretty easy. So we're going from 4 inches over her right leg to 5 inches at the center front to 6 inches at the side front to 7 inches at the side to 8. So the left side of her body is going to be a little bit longer. The back is going to be mirrored, and the right side is shorter. So we're kind of forcing a little bit of a sexy asymmetrical look. So we're going 7 inches, 6 inches, 5 inches, 4 inches. Then I like to just put the in-between measurement on there. So 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8 to 10. We're going to go 8, 9, 10. So we've got a little more swoop going on in the back. 8 to 6, the difference over here is just 7. And 4 to 6, the difference right here is 5. So let's connect all of those. You can even go further and keep, the more distances you find in between 2 points, the more you don't have to eyeball the curve. And we'll just cut this out of another piece of blue and look at it, how it hits on the dress form. So really here I could figure out 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 7. So we've got this, which is kind of a more bizarro shape, but we're having the shortest part be over a leg, and the center front isn't the shortest part. So if I were making this like out of georgette or chiffon or organza and covering it with ruffles, I would pick one side, the same side of every piece, to be the straight of grain. So I would say that this side of this piece is straight, this is bias, this is straight, this is bias, this is straight, this is bias. Do you guys get what's going on with that idea? It will keep the bias from growing. and you just work your way around. So obviously this isn't one of those patterns that you cut one and flip it over. You're going to cut A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all with the same side of the pattern facing up. And instead of doing this in eighths, you could also use this same straight to bias principle and do it in fours. You could do 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces like that, and then you still have a seam in the center back for an opening. And if your center back doesn't have a seam in it, you can also just put a placket in it. So we're not going to cut this into this many pieces, but let's cut this shape out. So this is high-low with high being over a leg. It sounds like the Seven Dwarfs song, high-low. I thought I'd get a chuckle from somebody in the room. Everybody's just enjoying their project, or glad that the ice skating thing is almost done. What? They're making faces behind my back. What? No. You guys are gonna miss the ice skating. Everybody, our fitting for the ice skating kids went so well. And what I've discovered is that there's a mom catalyst that makes them go not well. So if the mom catalyst is missing, everything goes really well. And it's just this one mom. Sabina, when she showed up to the ice skating rink, she said it was so nice to not have butterflies when she got to the parking lot because these people stress us out. And I said, well, I had both of our butterflies for the day. Sympathy paints. But I got myself so worked up and we got in there and it was totally fine. They were thrilled because they just let us do what we know how to do. Instead of my new favorite word, micromanaging, which is when you're managed by a mother. Micromanaging. I mean, we should put it on shirts and aprons. I'm marking my center front and center back. And since I don't have a seam going on right now, I'm going to just put a cut in my center back so that we can look at it. But that's the weirdo shape to get it short over one leg, but have something symmetrical in the back. I think Houston's Cinderella's Spanish maidens are cut this way. So now when we put our front on the front and our back, I should have used wimpier fabric. This stuff is pretty joyous. When we put our front on our front and our back on our back, now our back is pretty much symmetrical, like either side of the center back and side back have kind of the same amount of length going on. But if you look at the sides, you'll see that my left side is a little bit longer than my right side because we're kind of making this illusion of it twirling around her body, and that our highest point is actually over her right leg. So here's my highest point, and then it's getting longer as we move from the front towards each side. So any questions about that? Everybody's on board with that? Yeah? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Excellent. Okay. Let's now start doing the figuring for a classical tutu that's shorter in the front and longer in the back. There's a little more figuring. Or should I gather a piece of tulle since I have tulle on the table? Let's gather a piece of tulle. We're going to gather a piece of tulle and then get started on our classical tutu. This is a smocking pleater, which is rows and rows and rows of needles. And they're not all threaded right now, but this is a cool way to gather tulle. I'll hold it closer too so everybody can see it. Don't run out and buy one of these unless you think you really, really want one. But so any of these gaps you can put a needle in, and then right now there's just a piece of muslin in there, and to show that like it's gathering the muslin right on to those needles. And we're going to do it with a piece of tulle. So if anybody knows the ballet serenade, you have to start with string thread as long or longer than your finished thing. But if anybody knows the ballet serenade, one way to make those is to piece all your different colors. So serenade romantic skirts have like 2 pale blue widths of 54, and then a yellow width of 54, and then like 5 pale blue widths, and then a yellow width. They're really, really, really huge. And there's this like old strategic color pattern for a serenade. And anybody who works on serenade, they're actually put onto the leotard higher on one side and lower on the other, so the hems are supposed to be uneven. I've seen in a couple of those groups, people put different comments on there, but I've worked with a couple different estates on that show and dealt with, you know, people who wore them. And it was neat to know that the high on one side there, I think they're high on the right hip, but the skirt is cut even. So they're high on one hip, which naturally makes the opposite back of the skirt longer. So when we do the serenade ones, we roll all of this tulle onto a great big dowel, and it's a nightmare to jam it in here. Like you're jamming in like, you know, 20 or 30 yards of tulle onto a little dowel or little rod, and then you just work them through. And you'll know, like when you've wound too much on and you need to slide it down the needles, it'll stop turning easy. And the other thing that's a bugger, this is the kind of thing they use for baby clothes too, for smocking, is if you bust a needle, you just have to pull it all out and start all over again. We, the old set of Snow from Joffrey Ballet, we use this to make the caps of their sleeves, and we threaded it all with elastic thread and then gathered their great big snow sleeves to keep it real flat on their shoulder. And that was really pretty. So you could, I mean, you could even do a high-low skirt this way by cutting your short part and your long part. But how neat is that? So that's a smocking pleater, which you can use for all kinds of stuff. And the elastic thread is a nightmare to thread the needles with, but it works pretty good. Yeah, so there's that. The other thing to know, we've shown this before in class, and people have problems with the needles, is you need to make sure whoever you're ordering them from, there's like Amanda, Jane, and what's the other one? Martha Pullen. So there's the Amanda Jane brand and the Martha Pullen brand, and their needles don't fit from machine to machine. Okay, we're gonna start the math or the figuring for a classical tutu. And I think we should do this in full size. So we're gonna cut some of this out and sew and ruffle some of it tomorrow probably. And then we're gonna figure out also tomorrow how you do the tutu, that, right? If this is my oval or my hip, right? If this is the top of my tutu, we're going to show you how to come up with a style where there's points like this coming, kind of like a starburst, and then how you can get the next layer to overlap those points or just meet the points, whatever you decide. So we're going to show you how to deal with these top plates that look more like a snowflake or a starburst. We're going to work together to figure out the figuring for that. And it's just basically, it's like dividing your rectangle of netting into like, you want 16 points, do you want 8 points, do you want 12 points, folding it that many times and then figuring out what the short part and what the long part of each point are. And that we're going to mess with tomorrow. But with that same thought, you can also cut a ruffled skirt that ends up making a diamond. You can cut a tutu top plate that ends up being a square, as long as you know what's the center front length, what's the front length, what's the side length, what's the side front length, and what's the length in between those two spaces. So you end up with kind of this odd shaped curve cut, but once it's all ruffled, you can make a square or diamond top of a tutu. With that thought in mind, you can make a heart, you know, I don't think you could make a club or a spades. Well, you probably could. It'd take a little more figuring, but it's all doable. So if I wanted to do a heart, I would start with that shape and then cut my heart into that. And this you're probably going to want to divide like into 32 sections. It's not a very good heart. But if you wanted to do that, this is my hip. If you can divide this into like 32 or at least 16, figure out in little what all those lengths are. Once it's gathered and steamed nicely, you can create a heart-shaped top all out of netting. Cool, right? Okay, so let's start with the basic classical one that's short in the front and long in the back. Somebody give Rachel a thumbs up so I know we're still connected. And I know for a couple people this is like 3 a.m. and they're watching it when I send the recording. I would too if it was that late. Okay, so let's just do an 8-layer classical tutu, and let's start the figuring. So we're going to go from the top down. We're going to go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's say that this is like a young adult or kids. So we're going to do the whole thing with 4 widths of 54. So we're going to cut our whole skirt with 4 widths of 54-inch netting. And we're doing where the front is shorter than the back, but underneath the layers still gradate. They go from long to a little shorter, a little shorter, a little shorter, shorter in the front and the back. If this were a performance one, not just for looking at how it's done, I would probably cut 5, 6, 7, and 8 with 5 widths of 54. But just to make this one simpler to see and follow, we're going to cut it with 4 widths of 54. So 8 being the longest on her body, what we're going to just dream up now is how far from the front waist from the front high hip does the tutu stick out, and how far in the back does it stick out. So let's make one that's not completely even. So let's go from like 6 inches in the front to 14 inches in the back. So my 8, my longest is going to be 6 inches. So the next thing on your chart you're going to write is front, side, and back, because we need to know the front and the back of each piece. And a lot of this is just like monkeying with it on paper. You're going to see that I probably have to monkey with this a bit. How many miles do you remember did you cut out for Miami's high-low tutus? It's on Facebook. Hundreds of yards. So if my 8 is my topmost longest layer, 1 is my closest to the crotch shortest layer, if I want this to go from 6 inches to 14 inches, I can figure out my side right now. So if I went 6 to 12, it's easier to figure out the side. 6 to 14 is a little more. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, it's 8 inches different. So I'm going to add 4 inches. I'm going to split the difference. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to go 6 inches to 10 inches to 14 inches. Now, if we're looking at the underside of a classical tutu, usually the layers go like 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches on their way up. But if we start with 2 inches being our crotchmost layer, the width of our crotchmost, she found it.
What was your guess?
I don't know. I said miles.
It was miles, but we have feet also.
How many feet?
52,600 feet, which is 9.97 miles. And it was 105,300 scissor cuts.
Oh my God, Rachel cut how much miles?
9.97
9.97 miles of high-low skirts for Yeah, so she cut 9.97 miles of high-low skirt for Miami's court scene in Midsummer Night's Dream. Then she had to refold all the edges straight to cut the scallops in it. So she had to unfold it to cut the angles and then refold it to cut the scallops.
It was a distance from our old shop to the field.
Oh, it was from our old shop to the Field Museum in downtown Chicago. We like to measure stuff. Okay, so our longest layer is going 6 to 14, and let's say that our bottom one is 2 inches. And you can do a couple different things here. You can make your layer that's closest to the crotch go from short to long right away. So you could go like 2, 3, 4, make it a little longer in the back. Or what we like to do is keep like the first 3 rows or 4 rows of the tutu even. So just one rectangle for one rectangle for layer 2, the same rectangle for 3, and then maybe at 4 or 5 start our high-low quality. So let's say that's what we're going to do. Let's go 2, and then our next one, because we're only in the front, we've only got to get from 2 to 6. So we can't do like an inch and a half. We can't do 2, 3.5, 5, 6.5. We'd already be to our front. So let's just work in half inches and see what happens. Let's say if we went 6, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 3. So we could just start out with, we could go 2, 3, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Or if you want, you could just go down to 3 and you could start at 2.5 instead of 2 inches so that every single layer is getting a ½ inch longer in the front. Did I lose anybody there? I'm going to write it in Sharpie now. I wrote it in pencil just so I could make sure. So we're going 6 to 5.5 to 5 to 4.5 to 4 to 3.5 to 3. You could leave your first one 2, or if you want to keep it real even in the front, you could go 2.5. So now, let's say 1, 2, and 3, we're going to keep the same. That's going to be a 3.5 the whole way. That's going to be 3 the whole way. That's going to be 2.5 the whole way. So now we've got to decide how much jump is going to happen so that we can get our long piece in the back. So I usually kind of split the difference between what the front of this layer is and what the finish of that is. So if we were going from 4 to 14, you could say that that's 10 inches different, and split that in half. So you could add, so I'm going from 4 in the front of layer 4, but our ultimate length in the back is 14. You can just kind of like start slapping numbers down and seeing if it works, or you can like figure out like where to slap the first number down. So the difference between 4 and 14 is 10. So I'm going to split that in half and I'm going to add 5 inches. So I'm going to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to go from 4 till 9. So my layer 4 is going to be 4 inches in the front, 9 inches in the back. So here, underneath my 9, you're going to totally see that it's just 3.5, and then it starts to get longer. But underneath, it looks intentional and architectural. So now, I'm going to figure out how do I get from 9 to 14. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. No, it's too close. 2 inches isn't quite right. Let's try an inch and a half. 9, 10.5, 11.5, 12, 13.5. So that would work. I would be happy with that. That the top one only has a ½ an inch difference. Then, so from layer 8, if layer 8 is 14 and 7 is 13.5, we just have a ½ inch difference from our outside edge, and then we have an inch and a half, an inch and a half, an inch and a half, down to another inch and a half, and then our layers stay the same underneath. You could also exactly figure out the difference. I usually like to have the top 2 or 3 with less of a skip, just so there's a little more net to hold it all up, and that's your preference. So we're going to go 13.5, 12, 10.5, 9, 3.5, 3, 2.5. Now we have to find the difference, so we still have to find our sides. And for this one, I think I probably will use a calculator. Can I do this math? 13, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10.5, 11.5, 12.5, 13.5. It's 8 inches. So 5.5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9.5. Now 5 to 12, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 7 inches different. So 3.5. So 5, 6, 7, 8.5. 4.5 to 10.5. That's 6 inches difference. So 4, 5, 6, 7.5. And 4 to 9, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 5 inches different. So 4, 5, 6.5. Does everybody kind of get what happened here? It's kind of weird the first time, but we're gonna move on. We're good. We're good. Let me get some net, and we're gonna railroad cut this one because that's gonna be the easiest. So I'm gonna go grab a piece of. Actually, Rick, would you grab me that great big white roll of netting that's hanging up there? If you have a Rick, take advantage of your Rick. Let's make some more room here. So we've got underneath, let's just draw this one out too before we get started. Thank you. Underneath, this is my front, this is my back. Our first 3 layers, when we look at this one, are growing in length the same the whole way around. And then we have 1/2 inch skips. And then in the back, we have longer skips. So when we look underneath this, it's more something like this is happening. The front is staying closer together and the back is getting longer and longer as we move towards the back. Okay? Okay. So now I'm gonna just cut 4 widths of 54, but our diamond net works pretty much exactly the same both ways. So I'm gonna railroad cut it. So I'm gonna just measure 4 widths of 54 because it's easier for now. It'll be easier for us to fold up and ruffle 4 to look at. Oh, whoops. Oh no, I'm twirling up floor garbage on my roll. And I want to get my edge nice and straight first. I've got this big old chunk chopped out of it. Let me just straighten it out. I know who cut that big chunk out of it. It was me. So I'm going to do 4 54s. And like I know right where that is on my body. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll cut that. This is that 72-inch wide stuff. It takes just a little more futzing with, but it works. Let's see if I can not cut my mic cord. I've come really close to it, but I haven't done it yet. I think tomorrow, when we do the one that's like a starburst or a snowflake, I think I'm going to dye the edges of the net as we're ruffling them so that it'll be easier to see what the heck is going on. So now that I've got my 4 widths, I'm going to divide it just into 4 because we're cutting this high-low stuff. So we want to know where the center front is and the sides. Sabina, can I interrupt you? Will you just take all this stuff that's on my table and just set it on the floor or on the table by the window? Like all the chunks of everything. Yep. And I'm gonna have to get a yard. I'll keep the yardstick, a Sharpie, and the rotary cutter. Everything else, even this green mat, is going to be for you. So I've got my divide it in half, and I'm going to put a couple pins in it, and then I'm going to divide it into 4. Yeah, and the little dress forms and the calculator, that can all go. It doesn't take long to make a total mess. So now I've got my half. So if you were doing 5 or 6 widths of 54, after you've measured it, you still want to fold into half to figure out your high-lowy stuff. Thank you. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 widths of 54. Yep, thank you. Or if you're cutting it on the cross, seam it all together and then fold it up. And where you cut across your seams, you could just put a little bit of fray check or go back and restitch them because you don't want your seams to come apart. Okay. So now that I've got this into 4s, I'm going to fold it once more to make it easier to do my initial cut. So let's start with the longest layer, and then we're going to work our way down to the short ones. So we're going to end up cutting. It's going to seem like we're wasting some material because we're going to cut for our top one that goes, our 8 that's going 6, 10, 14. We're going to cut 14 and then angle out a chunk, which could be the piece of your next one. How should I do it? You know what I mean? I'm checking with Rachel. Like, we'll do it where we figure out, like, here's one, that angle can be part of our next one, and we work our way up rather than wasting. I should show the wasteful way because it's the clearest. Yeah, it's easiest to follow. So I'm going to show you the way where we waste a little bit of fabric, but it's the clearest way to see how it works. Then when you're laying in bed thinking about this, you can be like, oh yeah, I get what they mean by you can like work your way across the fabric. So I'm going to cut 2 14-inch pieces. So I'm going to just square up. So right now we're folded in 8s, but we're going to end up unfolding it into 4ths. So I'm going to mark 14. I'm going to mark my other 14. Actually, if I don't, I'm going to do one where I waste, and then I'm going to do the next one where I don't waste. I think that's a good way to do it. So I'm going to cut my 14. I want to put a couple pins. I'm going for coffee after this. Do you want a non-caffeinated beverage? Yeah, we need it. I mean, you need a caffeinated one, but you can't have one. So now I'm going to cut out my back. My back is 14. The next one we cut will show you how you can conserve instead of just wasting. So now we want to open it so that it's just into 4ths. So the center front is going to be on the fold, and the 2 cut edges are going to be our center back. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put a couple pins. So here, we've got 4 layers. In my left hand is my center back. Also in my left hand is the fold. So I have my center back and my center front on the same side of the table. Oh, I need that big long root, do you see it? It's that second one. Thank you. So now I'm going to measure my 8 inches down. 8 inches down is my center front. Then not the yellow one. Yep, just you got the yellow one? Yeah. I need this ruler, this great big ruler. So I'm going 8 inches down from my center front. Then I'm going to go way over there and do my side, which is 10 inches. And then my next cut is my longest part. Now, if you don't want to unfold all of this, you can do this with scissors. Which way do you do it? Just rotary cutter. Yeah. So I'm going to do this first one with scissors. So you can use chalk. I'm using a Sharpie. I'm going to mark my first cut. So from my front 8 inches to my side, which is 10. And then I'm going to take scissors and I'm only going to cut through my top 2 pieces. So I'm going to go from my side, but I'm only going to cut up to the top 2 pieces, okay? And use the ruler to kind of help hold things down. So I'm putting a clip at my side, and now I'm just in my top 2 layers of netting. And I should double check. Yep, I'm in just my top 2 layers of netting. And I'm going to cut all the way up to the front. My front being the shortest, my back being the longest. Okay, so this part is out of the way. Now, with my front and my back both being at the left side of my equation, now I'm going to take my ruler and get from that point all the way to my longest point at the center back. So we're making kind of like the path up the side of a Himalayan mountain, you know, to leave our prayer flag. You know how they zigzag back and forth up the mountain pass? We're zigzagging up the mountain pass. And this one, since I'm on the rotary mat, I'm going to just do this one with the rotary cutter. It actually shows, doesn't it? You can see what's happening here. So there's where like leaving it in fourths makes it a little more manageable. I've been at class other places where folks are trying to do this in one big long piece, and it's doable. It's just frustrating. So if you can deal with it in fourths. So now we have a front and a back, and we're in full size instead of half size. I'm going to use a safety pin, but I'm using a Sharpie. And I want to mark really well where the side seams are, because we've taken all this time to get the front and back doing what we want. We also want to make sure that our side points hit the skirt the same the whole way around. So I'm going to put another pin in my center front. And I'm going to put a little note on here that says this is my layer 8. Yeah, so Rachel has a brilliant point. So she said now is where you would fold this up to do your scallops. So we still have the 4 straight edges pretty straight, right? You would now hook this together. She doesn't have to. She's much better and faster at this than I am. You would hook this together. So with the straight edges at the top, we're going to ruffle the angled edge, or gather the angled edge. Now is where you would fold all of this edge up, and then you can cut your scallops or dags in this edge, okay? So let's cut number 7, and let's try to save material. So this one we ended up with this, with the 2 different strips, with this angled strip that we chopped off. We're going to try to save fabric a little bit. But since each piece won't have the same angle, you won't be able to like exactly cut the next one out without a little mathing again, okay? We're going to cut 2 out. So our next one, so to cut 2 out, we actually need to work in fourths, not eighths. So I've got to unpin my goods, but I'm going to leave a couple pins in it to keep it lined up. So now we're going to work just in fourths. Instead of cutting just the longest and trimming away from there, we're going to work in fourths. And my cut edge and my center front fold, now when I undo this, now they're on the right side of the table. And I've got the computer up here and other stuff. It's really easiest if you just get like everything you possibly can out of the way. So now we're going to do one. So 8 is done. Now we're going to go 5.5 to 13.5. So I'm going to start by marking 5.5 on my short edge and 13.5. So my center front is over here, and it's going to be 5.5. And my complete length of this layer is 13.5. And my side, so now on the left is my side is going to be 9.5. So we're going 5.5 is our center front, which is the fold. 13.5 is our center back, which is the cut edges. And now we're doing 9.5 in the middle. So now I've got my center back on the top. So I'm going to pencil on my center back. And I'm going to cut my whole center back off, even though we still have to cut some away. This is so we can waste a little bit less. So I'm going to cut my whole center back up to my side, and we're going to end up wasting a little bit less material. So we're going longest up to the side, center back, up to the side, and now we're going to fold open our packet. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Use the ruler as a weight. So now we've got to get from our side up to our center front. So we're just wasting now a little chunk of netting. It's like you're saving half of the amount. So now we're going to go from the side, the medium length, up to our center front, which is the shortest length. And this way I'm able to do both passes with the rotary cutter. So now instead of a strip that's 4 widths of 54 and pretty big, I'm just pitching 2 widths of 54 and it's narrower. So I've saved a little bit of fabric. And I also want to mark again where my side seams are. That is important. So I'm going to just use the Sharpie because this is a class. And mark my side seams. Then let's cut the next layer down, thinking about this angle that's already in our fabric. So this is going to be number 7. Keeping track of everything is like super, super helpful for this. So I've got my sides. I know where my middle front is. You could even take a safety pin or a chalk or Sharpie or something and mark your middle front. Okay, now let's do the next one. So now, earlier I said, our angles might not be the same the whole way, but if you've got a square table, you can kind of start laying out your next layer. So I've got my fold and fold perpendicular and my bottom matching I've got my fold matching the table. My bottom has got the angle going on. You'll see it's wanting to angle up towards my fold. But for the next one, for 6, we would figure out we're going 5, 8.5, 12. So you want to see if you go up, our front is going to be 5. Here's where futzing comes in. If this is 5 and the back is 12, we want to see if we can make a straight line go across there, or if we're having yet another weirdo angle. So see, can you guys see that if I just put 5 from there and 12 from there, I've got a bizarro angle. I've got an angle at the bottom and an angle at the top. We want to make sure that one part of our equation is a straight line. So we're going to go from the left straight across instead of it dipping down. So we're going to have to edit away our center front. Okay. So I've got my netting nice and even on the table, and I'm going to go the same distance. We're going to kind of make the top of this have to be parallel. Measure a little bit. So this is going to be my cut line. That's my cut line. Here's my 12. Oh, my ruler slid. And here's my 11 and 7/8. There's my 12. And then now I'm going to go over here and put my 5 in, which I've got it. And then my middle is going to be 5, 8.5, 12. So I need to figure out where my center front is. Here's my center front. Here is my, you know what? I have my front on the wrong side. I'm going to do it again, everybody. Can you see what happened? This edge needs to be my 12 and my 5. So I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip it. Did I totally lose anybody? You see where it's good to watch me screw up, because then you realize, like, I can do this too. This is the edge we need to make sure can be 12, because this edge is my fold in my front and my center back. So I'm going to redraw this one. It's easier to just cut each one at the longest at the center back and then to take away. But if you're doing a bunch of these, you kind of start to get in a groove for it. And since I'm just doing a few, I haven't got in the groove for it yet. So this is the edge I want to be 12. This edge, I want my center back to be 12. And I want my front to be 5, 12, and 5. So here's where we're going to shave off a little bit. 12, 5, and then we want to go to 8.5 over here. So each time we're losing a little bit, still we're going to lose a little bit of a wedge there, but we're not losing as much by kind of dealing with each layer like this than if we were completely cutting it apart. Because the angles aren't the same from layer to layer. You'll also find that you might have a wedge, and then if you slice the fold and just put an overlap in the center front, that it will work. You know, one piece of throwaway might make your next piece of stuff to save. So I need to go from here to there. Here to there to there. And definitely, if you're making 3 of these in a row, you start to get more of a vibe going on. I haven't got my vibe yet. So I'm going to open this up so that I can cut to my side. And I'm going to cut my side up to my front. You can also, like if you were making a group of these, get some typing paper or whatever you want, make a spreadsheet, and see if you can figure out, like, okay, if I'm going to make a bunch of these, what's the most logical way I can approach it so that you're not ending up with as much waste. And part of it is you'll see that, like, if you take an angle from the long piece, you can cut the other one, but your center front will have a seam in it instead of a fold. So now we're going from there to there. And then now we have to go from there all the way down to our longest part. Does anybody have any questions just about this one that we're doing right now that's a classical tutu? It's going to be longer in the back and shorter in the front. Because what I'm going to do this afternoon is ruffle this up and stick it on a panty so that we can look at it tomorrow. And then we're going to start cutting a weird shaped one that has like starbursts. So I think we'll cut and dye a starburst one and then stick that on a panty. So I still have garbage, but not as much. So now I've got my short side, my long side, and we just continue up. Keep it all folded though, because it will it's easier to cut the scallops in there. So then after all that finagling, now we have a straight edge again finally, and we will just cut out our next one, which is going from 4.5 to 10.5. So on my side with the fold and this cut edge, that's my center back and my front, I'm going to mark my 4.5 and my 10.5. Over here is going to be my 7.5, and I'm going to cut out one side and go down to the other until we're all cut out. Then our short ones are just simple. They're just straight rectangles. Any questions? This is what we're going for. Like this tomorrow, front to back. Longer in the back, shorter in the front. Like a mullet dress. Oh, people call them a mullet dress. This is a mullet tutu. All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow. And everybody go online and pick out one size of the radiance pattern. I'm going to send you that too. It's a tutu that makes like two halves of a yin and yang, and all the math is there. It'll be helpful to look at the math that's on that handout that comes with that pattern. Thank you. We're done? It probably froze. I got the last one out wrong. Do you think they do? No, because I'm explaining. If I cut one out right tomorrow. No? Was it really noticeable? No. Yeah. The one before it was successful.
Most of them weren't paying attention.
Anyway, okay. It's kind of boring stuff. If we do the star one, if we do the star one with dye tomorrow, that'll be better. I'm going to let the dogs pee and then get something from the coffee house.
Are we dyeing or doing anything to this?
They just need covered in lycra.
Okay.
Whatever you want, or velvet. Just cover them in.
So they have some color.
Yeah. So like pick a color that's like not on their other part. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then for Paul, remember he's kind of the tall one, and he's sort of the featured guy.
He needs some more ruffles.
Yeah, he needs some. I know. I have a note about trimming his shirt. Do you have something in mind?
But he now has suspenders and his shirt is tucked in.
Oh,
so
it is tucked in? Oh,
yeah.
but I have a note about snaps from shirt's weight, so that's no more.
Yeah, because does he have suspenders? He has suspenders. So he doesn't need snaps anymore.
Okay. All right.
But we'll put something on his cuffs. Yeah, so the shirt now tucks in.
That was my original thing.
That was the snaps. And then we switched his pants with some girl.
Okay.
That's what happened there. I cut one of my layers completely wrong. I think they'll get it. I knew too what I did as soon as I started cutting. They won't care. I don't know how I'm going to fill up 2 more hours though. Oh, how cute. The shoulder one for me. Really?
Well, it's 20 looks like.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot.
And it takes to make them big, it takes a lot.
Yeah.
Do you dogs want to go whiz? Come on. Let's go make a pee-pee. Let's go make a pee-pee. Let's go make a pee-pee. Oh my God, only one more webinar.
So nice.
I called you, but I didn't know you were doing it so early.
Huh?
I called you, but I didn't know you were in a webinar.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't answer. You found out what you had to do?
Yeah, well, couldn't remember they told me the door.
Oh, I didn't see the phone light up. I think it was sitting upside down, actually.
What?
The phone. I
Oh,
like put it here for when it lights up if you call.
okay, the Etsy lady is starting to make an invoice and a list of weights. Oh, they're starting for money. Come here, little grouch, little grouch, little grouch. Oh. Come on. That's not your bra. That's Everett's bra.
I don't know what it is for it.
Oh, no.
It's been on my partner.
Is it chaos mode?
Sorry. Tonight I need to take the TV down so I can start for players back there because it's really cold. It's almost like
Put a
a
little
report.
tool on there or something, a little mesh.
I don't know.
Little, you might need that.
Maybe
You
actually.
might need that wire stuff.
No, it's not that.
Oh.
But yeah, maybe it will be fiber.
Like staple some netting and then spackle over the netting and then paint that.
I didn't want cords shown.
To run the
To run the cord. I got paid to be different matching rules, so
Oh, that's
I
good. You can always do one of those